Okay, so today I want to talk about superheroes and why I think it's okay for some of them to be dark and have a cynical twist. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of everything that Zack Snyder has established in the DC Extended Universe, but one thing I will say for sure is that I don't think that a creator's vision should be dumbed down and rectified, changed just because it's different and it doesn't agree with a certain person's perspective. Movie and TV show adaptations of comics or just any medium in general, do have the ability to be experimental as well as they should. Which is something that I think really needs to be addressed going forward with not only DC, but with Marvel, Star Wars, and many other shared universal franchises. My opinion on the whole realism versus fantasy argument with comic book characters is really mixed. I will agree that some superheroes should stay a certain way in live action. Like, for example, I would rather The Flash be more traditional than realistic like Zack Snyder's version of the character. Just because I'm not a fan of the cardboard suit look and the casting choice. Ezra Miller to me doesn't really look like Barry Allen. He looks more like Wally West. As much as I understand the type of story that Zack is trying to tell with Flash in his own universe, I still think that it doesn't really need to be Barry Allen in the Flash suit. It really could have just been any other member of the Flash family. Like if this was Wally West, if it was Wally West wearing this Flash suit in his movies, I would have been perfectly fine with that. Because not only would it make sense from a historical standpoint of how many Barry Allens there has been brought about in live action, but it would also build on the idea of the DC movies actually being an extended universe, as opposed to it all just being a showcase for the A-list superheroes. Like, I honestly wouldn't mind if Wally West was the definitive Flash of the DCEU instead of Barry Allen. Because like I said before, Wally West is Barry Allen's successor, and is very easy to do on screen. Also, Ezra Miller's Flash has blue lightning energy every time he runs. Wally West has that in the comics. Why not just make him Wally West if you're not going to do Barry Allen right? But I get it, it's a real lived-in world, realistic take on the Flash. I just personally felt that they went a bit too overboard with it. And I still feel that way about it now, even with Zack Snyder's Justice League that's about to come out. But hey, that's just me. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that it's okay for some superheroes to be campy on screen, because sometimes the campiness could actually work out much better in that character's favor if that's inherently what their stories are based on. However, for other superheroes who have had a more serious and tragic upbringing and don't really have it as easy as that other character, sometimes it's best to go the dark, realistic route with them. And here's why. One common complaint I always hear about TV Zero is that it's too dark, it's too drab, and that it rips off Batman in many areas. Oliver Queen doesn't really feel like Oliver Queen, he feels like a Bruce Wayne clone. And as much as I do partially agree with that complaint often aimed at Arrow, one thing I will say is that I never really saw it as them trying to make Green Arrow into Batman. Instead, I always kind of saw it more as them modernizing Green Arrow up a bit, and actually having him, matter a bit more, as opposed to just being the same old side character that we all know from Justice League Unlimited. And quite honestly, I would rather see more of the grounded, realistic version of Green Arrow in live action than the campy, light-hearted version of him that's always been shown in the Golden Age DC Comics. I mean, one reason why I was never really a big fan of Smallville was because of how the way they have always portrayed Green Arrow on screen. As much as I understand why they chose to go in the type of direction they did with not only Superman, but pretty much all of DC's characters in the series, still, there were moments where I've often felt like Justin Hartley's Green Arrow didn't really stand out for me. Instead, he just appeared so wooden to the point where he was pretty much forgettable. The good thing about Stephen Amell is that he actually adds a bit more layers to the character of Green Arrow. He actually makes the character feel like more than just a side character. He actually makes the character look and feel like a more believable and compelling superhero. And that's kind of what I've always wanted out of Green Arrow for the longest. Because for so many years, Oliver Queen has always been in Batman's shadow as a cheesy side character, and has never really stood out on his own. The only time we ever really got to see that version of Oliver was in the 2010 Green Arrow short film, produced under DC Showcase as their lineup of animated shorts. 2004's The Batman animated series actually showed us a little bit of that version of Oliver Queen writing-wise. But other than that, Green Arrow has never really stood out as an interesting, compelling character to me. thus resulting in him being completely underrated and less relevant, with corny one-liners and that ridiculous Robin Hood hat. But CW's Arrow and other mediums similar to it pretty much challenges that narrative by making it seem like the Green Arrow character could actually succeed in a more realistic tone like Batman Begins. And in a way they almost succeeded. However, I will admit that Arrow did push that narrative a bit too hard with Green Arrow writing-wise, because Green Arrow is a hero for the people. I mean, part of the reason why Oliver rejects being a part of his father's company is because he wants to be the better man and right his father's wrongs. His whole character arc is inherently based on him becoming something greater, by fighting for the less fortunate and doing what's right for his family and the people of Star City. So writing-wise, I think that Oliver Queen should be Oliver Queen, but tone-wise, I think that Green Arrow should be dark. Because realistically, how can a guy go from experiencing so much hell on a deserted island for 5 years to suddenly be this campy, lighthearted, jokey character? I get that Oliver's thing is that he's super liberal about a lot of things, and that's kind of what makes his character stand out. But my thing is, if I'm not fully invested in the overall tone of the character, then why should I care about him if I can't take him seriously? And that's honestly how I've always felt about Green Arrow up until TV's Arrow came out. And I know there's probably going to be a few people telling me, "You gotta stop trying to make this character out to be something else and just accept him for who he is." Well, guess what? People said that same exact thing about Wonder Woman 1984, and yet that movie got criticized to hell for being cheesy and over the top like the Richard Donner Superman movies. I can understand wanting the character of Green Arrow to shine on his own, but I don't think that making him lighthearted and campy is the best way to go about it, because that would just make the character fade into obscurity again. At that point, no one is going to care anymore. No one cares about a version of Green Arrow that's just cracking jokes and nothing is serious to him. And I don't really want that version of Green Arrow, honestly. I want a version of Green Arrow like the 2010 DC animated short film where he's much cooler, more direct, more relatable, and actually does more than just crack jokes. Because really any superhero can do that. That's nothing special. Same thing with Superman. For so many years, I've always hated the Blue Boy Scout Superman, or at least I never really appreciated him as much as others have. And that is because the animated series had always kind of portrayed him as a Gary Stu, to the point of just being this perfect, happy, cheerful guy, and not really being relatable at all, just being overly confident about everything. And I never really liked that about Superman. I know that's kind of what made him popular in the first place. But honestly, I don't really mind seeing characters change status quo as long as they could actually succeed in the role that's given to them. And Superman for many years has been able to succeed in the comics as Clark Kent. Yes, Superman is powerful, but underneath all that power is an alien, who's human like us. And Zack Snyder definitely showed us that in Man of Steel, which is why I can't get behind any of the criticisms often aimed at Zack for making Superman into a villain. If anything, he actually made Superman feel more relatable than anything outside of his movies. I will agree that the overall story of his Superman does feel a bit rushed, but just like what I said about Green Arrow, I think the realistic tone works best for Superman. Because really Superman is just the outer layer. Clark Kent is the core, the inner skeletal structure of Superman. Every great superhero has one. I mean, part of the reason why Man of Steel is called Man of Steel is because it's not really centered around Superman. It's about Clark Kent in his journey of learning how to come to terms with his position on Earth. And his position on Earth is with his people in Smallville, Kansas. Superman is more than a traditional Boy Scout. He is a real person who goes through real everyday problems. And that is actually the kind of Superman that's not only shown in Man of Steel, but in Batman v Superman, where we actually see Clark be there to make sure others were actually safe during the bombing of the courthouse. And of course I'm referring to Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman, not that stupid theatrical version produced by Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns is a great comic book dude. He's made some really awesome DC comics, and his work on the Stargirl TV series is amazing. But there's many times where I've often felt like he's kind of pushed his luck with DC, and have taken things way too far. As for Batman, I'll just say this. As someone who is an honest-to-God fan of both the animated series and the Arkham video games, I personally would like to see Batman in his prime. You know, where he's actually above the whole killing shtick. because I feel like that is too much of an easy cop-out-ish way to establish superheroes, especially ones who don't have superpowers. Yes, Batman is a dark superhero, but there's actually a lot more to his character than that. Just because Batman is known for being twisted and vengeful doesn't mean that he can't ever rise above that and be better. And I'm not saying that Batman should ever go back to being silly and campy like Adam West, because obviously there's no reason for him to go back to being that. He shouldn't. But what I am saying is that I do think that Batman should be a bit more stoic and professional about his job in Gotham, as opposed to just being the same old cranky bats that we've known for so many years. I feel like we've reached a point now where I would like to see Batman actually fight more than just his own personal demons. Those personal demons being himself. And just to be clear, I don't mind seeing Batman viciously beat up criminals, because it does kind of serve as a remembrance of the justice side of his character. However, I would like to see a version of Batman do more than just kill criminals. Because like I said earlier, that's a decision that anyone can make. It doesn't just have to be a superhero, it could be anybody. And again, I don't mean to make this sound like I'm one of those people that just hates Zack Snyder's Batman and the choices that he makes. Because of course I understand, as well as the fans do, that his Batman actually has a lot of really cool, memorable moments. I just think it would be much cooler to see a properly established Batman actually take on more and more bigger challenges outside of his rogues gallery in live action. Not just with Darkseid and Steppenwolf, but with pretty much every other DC villain. Hell, I would love to see them do the whole Bat Who Laughs storyline where Joker actually gets the best of Batman, takes over his body, and he becomes the Bat Who Laughs. I would love to see them do a live action version of that. That would be awesome. But my thing is that I'm tired of always seeing DC go the Dark Knight Returns year one long Halloween route with Batman in the movies. Because I honestly feel like that kind of strategy has been done to death at this point. Why do we need to see those Batman stories be glorified in film when there are other cool Batman stories out there that are worth adapting on screen? And it's not just with Batman, the same could also be said for other DC superheroes. Like, I don't understand why Cyborg in the movies has to say booyah just because the TV show version of him did. And this is where I actually agree with Ray Fisher's statement about accountability being greater than entertainment. Because giving a creator constructive criticism and helping them see what their work is one thing, but criticizing a creator for what you want to see instead of what everyone wants to see is wrong and is really selfish and shallow-minded. I made a video talking about Ray Fisher, and of course it's not as in-depth and informative as any other video that has tackled this topic here on YouTube. But I just thought I'd come out and make a video on it anyway, just to kind of express my opinion about Warner Brothers and what they have been doing with DC for the longest. And for the longest, I've always felt like we've been in this weird-ass conundrum of Warner Brothers just holding off and canceling certain projects that were originally supposed to be. Like, for example, Teen Titans, the original, was supposed to continue. It was supposed to have a 6th season. But instead, Warner Brothers canceled it and had held that show off because it was dragging in more viewers than expected. And so they canceled it and held it off only to turn it into a sitcom. All because they wanted the show to appeal more to younger audiences. They ran Teen Titans into the ground just like they did with Superman, Batman, and many other DC projects. So therefore, I actually support Ray Fisher's act in wanting to change the norm of not only Hollywood, but business in general. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything about what happened behind closed doors because obviously I wasn't there. But as a DC fan who really wants them to succeed, I really do feel like something needs to change within the hierarchy of Warner Brothers. And it's not going to be with Walter Hamada because as far as I know, that guy has been nothing but totally negligent towards all of the issues of what's been going on behind Justice League. And it's not just with Warner Brothers, it's with every other studio. Constructive criticism is important, but sometimes criticizing one's work could lead to a bad product. And Joss Whedon's Justice League is a prime example of that. Geoff Johns' Green Lantern, Batman v Superman, and Suicide Squad are prime examples of that. Hell, even one of the Phase 1 Marvel movies, Iron Man 2, is a prime example of bad product placement. As funny and enjoyable as that movie was from time to time, it still had its moments of feeling like something that wasn't really meant to be. There's nothing wrong with making a few changes to fix what needs to be fixed, or rectified in the source material. But if a director has already done their research on the material and knows what's best for it in a movie, then I think you should let them make that movie and not try to trample them on their perspective and think that you own them. After all, the whole point of a good comic book movie, or just a good movie in general, is to see an artist's vision, not ours. Otherwise, what would be the point of actually enjoying a movie when you already know what you're in for? And that's one of the problems with the MCU, in my opinion, is that I feel like they rely too heavily on giving the fans what they need to see instead of what they want to see. In other words, they rely too much on status quo, which I think would be fine for certain movies that tell a small story, but not for every single movie going forward. Because I think that movies in general, especially ones that are in a cinematic universe, should have the freedom to tell their own stories as opposed to just connecting to what comes next. This whole idea of connectiveness is really just an add-on, and you don't need to have it be the focal point of every single movie. It's like fast food. You consume too much of it, you're going to give yourself a heartburn. And even worse, you're going to end up a diabetic. But anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Thanks for watching, fellas, and I'll talk to you guys next time.